Well, hey, Kevin, welcome back. How are you today,
Hey,
buddy?
good. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. It's a nice, cool morning up here in the Red Hills. Just got to enjoy a little bit of a rain shower this morning while I was out
Oh,
checking
good
cows.
deal.
Not it, probably not even measurable, but it was
Yeah.
nice to at least feel rain on my face.
Yep. Yeah, we have a little bit of rain in the forecast coming up, so hopefully it shows up.
You know, going into 2 years of this hard drought, I don't even. I don't even want to look at a forecast anymore because it doesn't ever say anything good. It's just
Yeah, exactly.
hot and dry. Like crap. If I want a Groundhog Day, I just go rent the movie.
Right? Around here, especially during the summer, they'll say, "Well, we got a bunch of rain coming, bunch of rain coming." Well, then time shows up and there's no rain. And we get that a lot during the summer. At least in the winter, it seems like it's a little more uh on point whenever they say there's rain coming.
Yeah. I, wouldn't it be nice to have that job? You could be wrong 95% of the time and you're still going to get paid. Like
Yep.
if we're wrong 95% of the time, you and I are probably out of business.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. No, they're set.
Yeah. All right. Well, I wanted to have you back again. And because we didn't really talk about anything last time I had you on the show. Like, I mean, we talked
We
about a
kind of
lot of
rambled.
welcome to ranching reboot, y'all. That's kind of what we do most of the time.
Right.
Um, so there's a bunch of other things I wanted to ask you about. I'm not even really sure where to start on this. Um, I guess we could kind of take at it with kind of attack your not attack. That's the wrong word. Shit, I don't even know what I'm talking about. Let's talk about cows. Let's talk
Okay,
about
let's do
let's
it.
talk about like I have some questions about AIing. Like
Okay.
and this will show my ignorance. So, like, I kind of know the broad strokes, right? But I don't know, some of the nuts and bolts details. And I want to talk about EPDs, like, and
Okay.
maybe we can really dig down into EPDs and discuss some of those. So, and I do have some other questions that folks have kind of sent in.
Okay.
One of the things I'd like to talk about, since you're in a registered business, and I'd like to talk about show ring value or perceived value in a show ring as compared to customer value or producer cost, and
Okay.
and by breeding to the show ring standards, are we doing our breeds any favors in the long term?
Okay. Gotcha. Gotcha.
So,
How do you want to start off?
oh man, I don't know. um, well, how about calving ease bulls?
Okay.
That's an easy one. I know we've talked about that a little bit. Um, so I kind of operate under the theory that we've gone entirely too far with calving ease bulls, and pretty much everything out there is quote a calving ease bull. And I'll also say this, I expect to I try to treat my heifers just like the cows I wish they were. Like that's how I
Okay.
sum up
Yeah.
my heifer development program. Okay. Like I have my ideal cow, one that, sticks rocks, dirt, salt, and scenery,
Yeah.
maybe a little protein supplement in the winter. And that's how I want my cows to perform. So I've got to push my heifers to that standard because I don't feel like, if I separate out my heifers and I feed them different and I feed them special to try to boost their fertility, I don't feel like I'm doing my cow herd any favors in the long run by trying to quote set those animals up for earlier success rather than letting them fail in the system and weeding them out.
Yeah. No,
Uh,
yeah, no, I think you're definitely right on that. At least you can't push them too hard because they're the ones that are gonna they need to be able to perform for the rest of their lives. Hopefully they're on the operation.
and okay, and I guess that kind of can tag into a discussion we had in the last day or so about bulls. Like it was one of my fans actually texted me this morning, Lincoln. Hi, Lincoln. Um, and we were talking about bulls. And so I operate under the philosophy that I want to buy my bulls from somebody as close to me on as similar of a program as I can find. Like, I don't want to go buy bulls that, from about 6 months of age, they've been pushed with a lot of creep feed and a lot of corn and a lot of high energy feed.
Yeah.
that's not what's going to make my program successful. What's going to make my program successful is a bull that can, that basically I can put in the worst, on the worst grass, in the worst pasture, and forget about, and he's going to look awesome. Like that's the bull, like that's the bull that's going to succeed in my program.
Yep. And he's going to go out there and still breed all the cows on whatever, whatever it is he has available, to eat. And that's a big problem, especially in Angus. I see it a lot. The calves just get pushed way too hard. You go to see them, well, any fat animal looks good. And some of those bulls, they get pushed so hard they'll look like another bull in the same pen that might perform even better, but they're just so fat you have no idea. And then you go take them out and put them out on the range or something and go to work, and they just fall apart. And then at that point, you don't know what kind of progeny you're going to be getting out of them. Is that what you're going to be getting? Is just animals that fall apart, or they have to perform on grain?
And that goes back to understanding your customer and understanding what value you as a business is providing to your customer and who your customer is. Like we have completely different customer bases, right?
Yeah.
And understanding what your customer wants, I think is, it's important for me being in a cow calf, wanting to look at, maybe get in a seed stock business later, or selling cows or selling some of my heifers off later. It's a difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
Like, that some of the record keepings, the registered folks want, like,
yeah,
got to get the calf weight within 24 hours. Like, I calf on 150 acre pastures. Like
it's not quite that easy. And they'll have adjustments also that you can do for birth weight. But even then, I think most people don't even realize how much their calves weigh a lot of times. A calf that could be, you might think it's 80 pounds, it could be 90 pounds, or it could be 70 pounds. It's just a matter of going out there and actually, weighing them. And it was kind of tying back to what you were saying earlier about calving these bulls. I think we too much focus on the calving ease over time. It hurts the structure of the cow and whatever females you keep retaining out of that kind of genetics. At that point, that's when you're going to start having more problems with your calving ease maternal, where the cows are going to have more problems with dystocia. If they happen to have a real heavy calf or a big calf, they're going to probably have dystocia. You're going to have to pull the calf. And a lot of times that coincides with generations of calving ease that are backed up in the pedigree. And just because an animal has a real high calving ease, real low birth weight, it doesn't mean that the animal's going to end up performing the exact same in the pasture. They need to have a calving ease bull in order to have a calf almost.
And that almost seems like we've taken things too far. Like when we have these really big 1,200 pound cows, or the quote 1,000-pound cow that nobody's ever actually put on a scale. Like if a 1,200 pound cow can't have a 70, 80 pound calf, why do our cows weigh 1,200 pounds? I mean, I don't know what any of mine weigh. I'll be straight up honest, and I suck at estimating weight by eyeballing. But some of my little Coriander cows have calf that's not a whole lot bigger than a jackrabbit, and 6 months later he's only standing about 6 inches shorter than she is.
And there's certain genetics also that it doesn't. I don't think that can apply to. I don't know exactly your cattle, but I'd imagine they couldn't probably handle a super heavy birth weight Angus or Charolais kind of bull. Or let's say like they come out with 100-pound calf, they're probably going to have a little bit more harder trouble trying to have them, Coriander cows at least, is what I'm imagining.
Well, if I pay attention to Steve Campbell, and he talks about the slope between hooks and pins, the hook bones and the pin bones, and I see the more attractive slope, like the pelvis rotation. I see that more in the Corrientes and Longhorns than I see that in the Continentals. Like you see the Continentals, especially the Angus, that pelvis is rotated up and there's a steeper slope from the hooks to pins. That pelvis is rotated forward, which kind of constricts that birth canal opening.
Yeah. And even the Brahmas will have that they prefer kind of a lot more slope even than Angus sometimes. Sometimes Angus, they'll end up getting that tail head that just sticks straight up sometimes.
Yep.
And you can't tell if it's an animal sitting there being flushed all the time, or if that's just genetics and that's, the way they look. And a lot of times I think that does come from the show ring visual appraisal that people like to breed in. Whenever you're showing cattle, you'll loin them with the show stick, where you'll just get the show stick and stick on their back, so that way they're nice and pretty. And
okay, so for the people that have never showed cattle or been around that, what the hell is a show stick?
well, it's a stick that on the end has I don't even know what I'm going to call it, a poker on the end, and it has a hook, kind of like an L.
Okay.
And then you'll just use that to set up the feet. And also you can scratch them on their belly and on their brisket to keep them calm.
Okay, so it's the stick y'all are carrying around that, just
Mm-hmm.
get them exactly the right spot and keep them calm when you're in a show. Okay. Yeah,
exactly
that was probably the dumbest question asked this week on the podcast.
Never a dumb question.
Okay, so we're talking about show ring cattle, and I guess that's a good segue into what I mentioned earlier about show ring value. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'll shoot off my mouth and offer my opinion for what it's worth first. I kind of feel like what they're looking for in a show ring has almost no correlation to pasture performance. There's a lot of visuals I think they look at in a show ring that if we're trying to drive that metric, are maybe going to end up hurting our animal performance in a natural environment. And I get there's pressure competition, totally get it, and you want your animal to look the best there is. I would prefer to go to a cattle show where they were all pulled straight out of the pasture the day before and hauled to the show ring and maybe given a bath. Like,
yeah,
when you're spending 6 hours blow drying and putting blue shampoo in your cow, and it's on a special diet that you hand feed to it 4 times a day to get that perfect show animal you're going to get paid a lot of money for, is it good business? Yes. Are you doing anybody any favors out in the real world? I don't think so.
it's a beauty pageant for me. That's what I think it is. I think showing is really, really helpful and good for the junior programs. And then once out of the junior programs, I could, some breeds, it works, but there's too many that breed for the show ring instead of breeding for the pasture, and then they go to the show ring. There's a gentleman that raises beef masters, and he'll take animals to the show ring if, he'll pull them from the pasture and think, well, she's really pretty. That's kind of my ideal kind of cow. I want to take her to the show ring and, promote her. And I think doing like that is fine, because he was breeding for the pasture. He's breeding for performance. But then you get people that's all they do. All they do is the show ring. That's all they breed for. So what are they doing? They're breeding for a judge. They're breeding for one guy's opinion and to hopefully make bank on that. And I think it takes a lot away from the juniors in when there's parents that can buy their champions. They can buy the champions for the kids. They have $100,000 to spend. Okay, go buy that. Go win all the scholarships that the other kids who need the scholarship money, and they're not going to get it probably because their parents didn't have as much money as the other ones that could buy the champion. And then at that point they say, well, it's a good learning experience for the juniors. Well, then what is that junior learning if mommy and daddy can go and buy all the champions for them, and then also help feed, and then pay for the trailer, pay for all the hauling, pay for the hotel? I don't see much, unless that's all you do and you sell really high quality show cattle. I don't see where the return on investment is anymore, considering the cost of feed, how much you have to feed them, gas, everything's gone up. It's
Yeah,
real. That's a really high input field in the show in cattle.
that's why I've never been in it.
Yeah.
I'm not a high input guy. And so the young man that has helped me the last 2 summers, great kid named Keaton Wisk. He's doing the he's going for a degree at range management at Kansas State University. Really super proud of this kid. Anyway, he started with me not long after I started the podcast, in fact. And we spent a lot of time that winter and spring driving around looking at cows. Now, Keaton has a background in showing. Mostly he would show goats because goats are cheap and cows are not, and it requires a lot less infrastructure to keep a goat and raise a show goat than it does show cow. So that's why he was in show goats. But he's also in FFA, and he did some livestock judging, and we talked a lot about the difference between the show ring and how my cattle would do, like if I just took them from the pasture to the show ring and what the judges would be looking for. And again, my incredibly limited experience, it seems like the judges want the steers to look like heifers, and they want the heifers to look like steers, and they want everything to look square.
Pretty much.
And that just seems like it's completely backwards. You look in nature, okay? You look at human boys and girls. We're different critters. Okay. You look at chimpanzees, they're different critters. You look at hippopotamus, males and females, they're totally different critters. I mean, the males have a phenotype, and the females have a phenotype. And when we have these judges that are looking for square cattle, what's the hormone balance in that animal to make it look like that? I mean, I want my bulls to look like they're walking uphill on level ground, big shoulders, big neck, slim waist, good butt. I want my cows to look backwards. They need to look like they're going downhill on level ground, good neck, not too heavy in the shoulders, big guts, and a big butt.
Yeah.
They need to look like girls.
Yeah. They need to have their feminine characteristics, and it plays back into their fertility. Also, you get, the females that are just too short neck, too short bodied, they look way too much like a bull. Well, that's what they're going to produce as, and it's not very well. If you have a cow that's just not feminine at all, she doesn't have the characteristics to really have longevity in the herd.
And likewise, I think the same should be true for bulls. If he's, not a really masculine looking bull and not really expressing, his inner maleness, that animal is going to be subpar and not perform near as well in a pasture, I think.
And there's a lot of bulls now that I see that are really EPD oriented, and they don't look like bulls. They look like they should be steers. And that's what they should have been, but their helping trait was the computer generated EPDs that they have, and that's what saved them. But no, then they go and get collected now because of it, and it just keeps propagating bad traits.
That's a good segue to tell me how you really feel about EPDs.
They're helpful. They're a tool, and I use them still. But if there's certain EPDs, I don't want to go too extreme on, whether too extreme low or too extreme high, just to save myself for my market still. And also because there's some truth to them, as well as genomics, which with Angus, it really doesn't matter once you have the genomics enhanced into the EPDs.
Okay, what are genomics for the 5-year-olds like in the conversation?
I'm not going to be the best at explaining this. It's taking the DNA on them and then sending it to Zoetis or to the Angus Association, and what it does is it provides a little bit of accuracy to the EPDs. So on the EPDs, you'll have the trait, which let's say birth weight. You have birth weight, and then you'll have the EPD number itself. then you'll have the percentile rank, which would be, of all the animals it's like class ranking in your high school. If you're the top 1% in your class, you're first or second smartest. Well, same goes for the EPDs on the percentile rank. And then you'll have accuracy, which would be, 50% accuracy, 75% accuracy. However,
So that would be like they'd say we're 50% sure that these genetics will, marble 90% prime.
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah, that's pretty like a 50% accuracy, kind of like weather. When the weatherman says there's a 50% chance of rain on this day, well,
there's a 50% chance it
yeah,
won't.
yeah, exactly. And they'll usually start off with 5% just as like baseline. That means there's no accuracy at all. And the genomics will kind of bump it up. Sometimes some of the traits will bump up to like 10, 0.1, which would be like 10%, 20%, so on and so forth. And there's a lot of animals that I notice in my herd. Once I get the genomics back, I'll look at the animals, see how they're performing, and it, to me, it coincides. I can definitely see why this one has such a higher weaning weight compared to these others. And then there's some that they're just dinks. They're ugly and they might have really good EPDs. Well, I'm like, well, the EPDs aren't right on this animal, so I'm not going to breed this animal with that in mind.
Or is that one of those things that, it's just a genetic outlier? Just bad roll of the dice that day and just didn't get the right combination of genes turned on. Could be.
And I don't know if I explained it like this in the previous podcast. The way I like to explain it is like you want to go buy a box or a tool chest, whatever, to store all your stuff in. And you have a few different brands you can pick from. Well, one of the brands is from a guy, he's been making these toolboxes his entire life. He makes it by hand. He makes with all the different tools that he needs. He makes it according to your specifications. He makes them custom, does it really well, and he has a really good product. Then you got another guy, he just went and his product is made from a 3D printer. The guy has enough money, he went out, bought the 3D printer, and now he can just make the exact same copy over and over and over again. That's the only tool he uses. And personally, I'd want the tool chest, the toolbox from the guy who takes his time, uses every tool at his disposal to make a good box, compared to the other guy that's just like an EPD breeder, is just breeding on EPDs, just that one tool, just keep pushing them out, regardless of how good the feet are, how good the phenotype is.
Have you priced a handcrafted wooden toolbox?
It's probably a lot more expensive.
They are high.
That's why they go the other route. Yeah.
They are high. And I appreciate that analogy. And I think I can kind of see that as applying to, the production side of agriculture and the emerging regenerative / grass-fed side.
Yeah. Because like, you could say the EPDs are like a hammer. Well, I don't need a hammer every single time, but maybe this one animal, the hammers worked really well, and I can utilize that out of that animal. But
okay, EPD stands for expected progeny difference.
Correct. Yes.
Now, I'm also going to say that when I get a bulk catalog, it generally goes right in the trash unless it's a feral cattle company. Those I actually look at because the pictures are bigger, the data block's bigger, and I don't have to put on my reading glasses to read 6-point font and try to decode a bunch of damn numbers. So other than it is expected progeny difference, the hell does that even mean, and how do they figure it?
So I tell you what, I got a catalog right here, McKellar Angus. And this is a really good operation that I use all the time. They're actually going to be having a sale coming up in October. So when you look at the EPDs, the progeny difference is saying, well, if a bull is, let's say, a +1 on his birth weight, and then you have another bull that is a +2, what it's saying is, on average, the +2 bull will add 2 more pounds on average to the birth weight of his calves compared to well, I said 1, but a bull that is a +0 or a 0 on his birth weight.
Okay.
So the other bull on average is going to throw 2 pounds heavier on his calves than the other bull. Well, that doesn't mean that bull's going to be throwing 80-pound calves and this one's going to be throwing 60-pound calves. You don't really know because it's also dependent on the cow.
Right.
What mainly it's going to be dependent on the cow. So
And
if you have, go ahead.
that can be dependent on, like, even if it's a donor cow. So like if you're doing a recip and a donor, that can be even weirder, right? I guess we
I
can get
think
back into that
so.
later.
I'm not very knowledgeable on that. I know that you can have birth weight differences from embryo transfer. I think that's just something to do with the hormones maybe in the recipient cow as well. But yeah, I don't know a whole lot on that.
Yeah, didn't mean to get you off track there.
You're good. So what was I saying?
We're
Yeah,
talking about birth weight EPDs.
and some of my bulls I use, my herd sire and then the son I retain out of him are over a +6 on their birth weight. So what it's saying is on average, their calves are going to weigh about 6 pounds heavier on average than compared to other sires. Well, you'll notice that in their progeny are going to be in the 80 to 90 pound range typically. When some bulls are going to be lower, it might be in the 70 to 80 pound range. Excuse me.
Okay.
And another thing that people forget is that those EPDs can also compare to other breeds. So a +6 Angus birth weight can be correlated to, if I remember right, almost a -2 Charolais birth weight.
Are there good? Okay. So EPDs are a good tool for comparing within a breed.
Correct.
But when you're trying to compare Angus EPDs with, say, Charolais EPDs, there's conversion charts, or is it just something that's like you're really going to take with a lot of grain of salt?
Probably need to take it with a grain of salt. Because I think another important thing to factor in is also how many progeny going back in the pedigree have data turned in on certain EPD traits, and like especially compared to other breeds. Because in the Brahmas, I don't even care about the EPDs because the most bulls will be less than 100 progeny, and in the Angus, you'll have normally over 100 progeny, 1,000 progeny, 10,000, and that's normal to see.
Yeah,
So
I don't think
depending on
100
the
calf set is really enough to get. That's not a big enough data set.
Yeah, especially when you have out of bulls that have semen that is really expensive and you're only flushing to cows. So then the majority of your calves are going to be out of one cow from a certain bull sometimes, not where AI to the entire herd. And then you have 100 different cows, 100 different calves, and all out of the same bull. Then you can get a good idea of what kind of data you're going to be getting in from that bull later on.
So how do they figure up EPDs?
That I don't know. I'm going to be honest. I don't know. I think there's some of them that are, what's the term? Privately held information to the associations, just so it doesn't get out to other associations to copy them. For instance, there's a value, an index value in the EPDs and the Angus called dollar maternal, and that information is the formula that goes into that dollar value is privately held information. So all the traits that go into the formula, but you don't know what the formula is actually.
The one I really want to know about is the dollar's energy.
Mm-hmm.
So that should be the way I understand what they're telling us about the dollar energy EPD is. That's going to be a measure of how that animal is going to perform on grass, how efficient of a converter she's going to be. Is that right?
That's typically, I tell you what, I'll pull up the definition just so we know for sure. But that's the way I see it. Typically, those grass efficient genetics are going to be higher dollar energy. And you'll notice that the really high performing bulls, really top 1% birth weight or weaning weight, yearling weight, super high performing bulls like that are going to be very low on their dollar energy.
Because they need a lot of power to put on those pounds, a
Yep.
lot of high energy to put on those pounds.
They need a lot of food. Let's see, EPD and value definitions.
And I suppose if you're living next door to an ethanol plant, you have unlimited access to wet beet pulp and spent distiller's grains for
Yep.
basically nothing. I mean, $20 a ton is like an absurdly ridiculous price for that kind of cow feed. Yeah, build a feedlot, have some cows. Yep. Don't care about your dollar energy, but when all you have is grass and native range, you know, a measure like dollar energy to me should be everything. But I really question the validity of that dollar energy number because I have no idea how it's calculated. I have no idea if it has any bearing in the real world other than the Angus Association saying, yeah. You need a high dollar energy EPD in your cows. Okay, Angus Association, tell me what it is. Tell me how you figure it out.
I found the definition here. It says expressed in dollar savings per cow per year, assesses differences in cow energy requirements as an expected dollar savings difference in daughters of sires. A larger value is more favorable when comparing two animals, more dollars saved on feed energy expenses. Components for the computing the cow dollar energy savings difference include lactation energy requirements and energy costs associated with differences in mature cow size. So animals that are going to be more grass efficient, have a higher dollar energy, they're going to be smaller mature frame cows. They're going to be cows that don't milk as heavy because the heavier milking a cow is, typically they're going to need more energy requirements.
Takes power to make milk.
Mm-hmm. But and that's the cost that it comes with the high weaning weights, the high yearling weights. Excuse me, I'm about to burp some. And yeah, and I think that is an important EPD value that you can look at, as well as DMI, which is dry matter intake. On those cattle, you'll typically see the higher dollar energy kind of cattle, you'll typically see a lower dry matter intake, which is important. You want less intake to put pounds on. And then there's another EPD called residual average daily gain, which you would want higher, obviously higher average daily gain and a lower dry matter intake. So, less feed, more gain. And those are two EPDs I'm trying to keep at a good balance within my herd. I've been able to have a good start with that already. Is it something that I notice very well in my cattle? Not really, but I think it's at least a starting point for where I can begin to decrease my mature size on my cows and at least have that EPD backing up that I can hopefully maintain that kind of efficiency with what I have so far, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Did we make our cows too big?
I think so. There's a lot of cows that people just love to show off how good of donors they are and stuff, how fat they are. But it's tough for me to say because there's a gentleman out in West Oklahoma, we talk a lot, and he prefers larger frame cattle on his range. He says that the larger frame cattle just do better, and I want to say that he sells like at the sale barn, and typically they don't want cattle that already look finished.
Right.
Like feedlots, they're not going to go and buy calves that look like they're already finished, and by the time they're done finishing them, they're so overtly fat. They want calves that are going to at least grow into themselves still while they are being fed out. And a lot of times the more grain efficient kind of cattle are going to be larger framed, is what I typically see. But when you go and see an operation that I'm utilizing their genetics, Powerplus cattle or Duff cattle company in Oklahoma, they use a lot of the OCC genetics, which
is that oldie?
Yeah.
Okay. You said I'm going to put that in the show notes. You said Powerplus
cattle. Yes.
And what was the name on that?
Duff cattle company. It's the same thing, but they have their own feedlot actually where they feed out these genetics, and I mean they reach prime and choice just like all the rest. They're going to be smaller frame, probably smaller carcass weights, but I mean I can imagine those cattle would probably I'd imagine they would finish out quicker. You may not be getting the same kind of carcass weight that I want to say that we've been trained to want because of because of feedlots. They want a certain size carcass weight. They want a certain size to be able to get what they need from the packers and stuff.
You know, we're talking about like the carcass size that the packers and the feedlots want. And this, it circles back to understanding your customer base, and like I said before, y'all out there listening to this and, you have a feedlot, fine. That's fine. Like I'm not going to come to your door and yell at you for having a feedlot and like talk shit on your waste management procedures. Okay. I'm not that guy. I'm just going to keep asking you the questions. Like, are you sure this is what we should be doing? Is this an ecologically sound process? So, we've the cow size is an interesting discussion because, you have on one hand, you'll have like North American Meat Institute, some breed associations saying, oh, yeah, we got to have these bigger cows. We got to have more pounds, more pounds, more pounds. But at the end of the day, it's not how many pounds you take to the sale barn. It's what it cost you to raise those pounds. It's how efficient you were at raising those pounds. And, I like my Coriander cattle. Yeah, my cows are like my little cows are 650. I've got a 10-year-old cow that's 650 pounds and she's given me 2 calves already. Like, what's wrong with my little 650-pound cows? Like, I got another one that's not a whole lot heavier, and her calf from this spring is only about 3 inches shorter than she is. It's kind of ridiculous to see this calf, this, big steer calf nursing off this little tiny 650-pound cow. It's like, that's a little weird, but it works. And if I can have a 600-pound cow that's weighing a 400-pound calf, I think that's a win. Like, I would much rather wean a 400-pound calf off a 600-pound cow than a 600-pound calf off a 1,000-pound cow.
Yeah, definitely.
And when it comes right down to it, the cows are what eat the grass. I mean, what that calf is going to eat in its first year of life, daily dry matter intake is not much compared to the cow.
Yeah.
So if we're just looking at trying to raise as many pounds of beef per acre as we can, pounds of protein per acre, it makes sense to have smaller cows. More hooves on the ground means more herd effect, and it means more calves. Yeah, I'm going to show up at the barn with 400-pound calves. They're still going to sell for $2.
Yeah. Yeah, because they still have the room to grow into. And yeah, exactly. They'll sell for that.
And the guy down the road is going to show up at the barn with 650 and 700s and wonder why he only got $1.50, $1.60 for them.
And how much more money did he spend on his cows maintaining them than you did? And in the long run, you're going to be ending up making more profit
because I have more head and I'm bringing in more pounds with less feed cost and less depreciation.
Yeah.
Two biggest costs around your ranch: cow depreciation and fed feed costs.
Yep.
Like, and if you can get those two under control, you're probably going to do okay. Like, I cover depreciation on the front end by buying depreciated out cows that nobody else wants. So they're already depreciated out and they don't need a whole lot of feed. So that helps me solve the fed feed costs.
Yeah, exactly. And right now, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No. I was done.
Yeah. Right now I'm trying to bring down my mature size on my cows, because I had a cow run through the chute the other day. What did we were vaccinating, and we put her on the scale and she weighed 1750, and she didn't look 1750. She was pregnant also. She was pregnant, but she weighed 1750. And she's the same, because that's the one thing about when we talk about mature size or mature weight. There's some cows, Angus cows, that they're not tall, they're not big framed, but they're heavy, they're thick, they're wide. And I'll send you a picture of this cow. She's beautiful. She's exactly the way that you described, but she's 1,700 pounds when she had a calf in her. And I don't mind bringing down that weight just a little more because
Do you
she
know
keeps
how many
herself from.
Corrientes I could run for that 1,700-pound
Yeah,
cow? I could
exactly.
probably run 4 cows
Yeah.
for what
And
she
so,
eats.
and luckily she's the kind that I don't have to supplement. Typically she goes out to the pasture, regardless of the pasture, she keeps her weight, she keeps herself. So now with her, I'm going to breed her to a smaller frame kind of bull to hopefully bring that down.
Like you want to
But
keep her phenotype, just shrink it a little bit.
yes. And because I have other cows that'll weigh about the same, but they're probably 2-3 inches taller than her. And for me, that's too much. I'd rather have the 1,700-pound cow that's smaller frame than the 1,700-pound cow that's taller frame, because that's the one that's gonna probably need more milk. That's not the kind of approach I'm wanting.
Shorter cow at the same weight is going to have more meat on the bone.
Yeah.
And it should have it, like logic says, it should have a better meat to bone ratio.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing, the Brahma breed does this especially, but they focus so much on bone, especially in the show ring, because there's really focused on the show ring, and bone is a huge. The bigger the bone, the better. It usually seems, but the problem with that is, I feel like you're taking away your longevity in your cow herd at the end. You're going to start getting more joint problems. You get foot problems, weak pasterns, because there's so much weight that they're packing onto these animals. And just over time, their pasterns just
their feet collapse.
Yeah. And they end up getting bad feet. And there's a post on Facebook. A guy was showing his embryos that he has out of this cow. I looked at a cow and he was saying, well, she has one of the biggest bone cows you'll ever find, Brahma cow. And I go look at her production. She's only raised 1 calf and she's 11 years old.
Like,
he only has 4 other embryo calves. And I'm thinking, guys, what are we doing? This isn't.
Guys like that aren't doing the industry any favors.
They're not. And there was another cow that he'd posted. I have embryos out of this cow. She's a double bred granddaughter out of this bull. She is polled. She's a black Brahma. And I went and looked her up, and she's 5 years old, never had a calf. Picture of her, she's ugly, never had a calf. But those 3 things, she's polled, she's black, and she's double bred granddaughter out of this bull. Well, that means she's good. No. She needs to go to the sale barn. She needs to be out of here. We don't need that genetics continuing.
She needs to be in a box somewhere at freezer camp.
Yep, exactly.
I feel like there's a lot of cows that guys are that are like that. And is it somebody that's like, well, obviously they have a day job, because there's no way anybody in the cattle business that's trying to actually make money off of cows would have a 5-year-old cow that has only had 1 calf. Like, the only way that makes sense is there's massive subsidy or off-farm job keeping that enterprise alive.
Yeah. And well, he's hired by the owner of the ranch, and they had sold a company for like 300 million. So he just had a bunch of FU money to throw out. And
you can say fuck you money. That's fine. We can cuss on this podcast.
If I won the lottery, if I had that kind of money, I would. Luckily, I've already started in this from like a poor man's approach. So if I had that kind of money, I feel like I'd be on top of the game above everyone at that point, because I could utilize it so well. I could make.
I saw that TikTok and I got to thinking, what would I do with $100 million? And the first thing I thought of is, idiot, you need to hire a lawyer if somebody gives you $100 million and an accountant, and not touch it and let them tell you how to spend it, because you'll just, I'll just go to Vegas and do hookers and blow or something.
With the way that I said it, that 100 million's gone already.
Yeah, like, by every ranch that touches mine. Yep. Okay, we're done.
Yep, that's it. We're done.
Yeah, there's a good quote. Like, I can't remember where I heard it, but there's somebody said, "Well, I don't want to own everybody's ranch. I don't need to own all the land in the world. I just want to own everything that touches my ranch."
Exactly.
Like, yeah, well, there's a point where that has to stop there, buddy.
And like it's fun to dream like that and stuff, but you never know. Yeah, it's a good way to at least keep you on your toes to be able to see where you could push your operation in direction where you can have the best kind of outcome with the money that you do have, at least.
Like, thinking about having $100 million is way too much money for me. Like, I've got to think about like maybe having 5. Like, okay, I can think about how I could get rid of 5 and leverage that for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Build a business that'll provide me income for the rest of my life. I can do that with 5. $100 million would probably just turn me into a total idiot.
Yeah, probably.
I wouldn't build a feedlot.
No, that's out of the question.
I'd probably buy some extra land, and I'd probably definitely double down on fencing and water development. I hate to say this, but it'd probably be a lot more closer to what Allejandro Carillo is doing down in Chihuahua Desert, Mexico. You have any idea what I'm talking about down there?
No. I think I've heard something, but
I'd say how many acres he's running down there, but I'll get it wrong. They spent, so like Chihuahua Desert in Mexico, 12 to 14 inches of rain a year.
Yeah.
Like farther south than you and I. So it's definitely hotter and drier, probably higher country, pre-poor grass production. Like it's a lot of land, 25,000 acres, I think, off the top of my head, without,
yeah.
I don't have Jamie around to look anything up, or,
Right.
or a Dave. I got to do all this.
That's all we need. Yeah.
Got to do all this off the cuff. Well, maybe one of these days we'll get some folks in Discord that can look stuff up for us. But no, what he did is they went in and did super intensive water development, like miles and miles of pipe. Like makes my water systems we talked about on last week, makes them seem like shit that wouldn't even get out of their yard. Okay, like miles and miles and miles and hundreds of tanks. And
oh gosh, yeah.
And what they did is they fenced the whole thing with electric fence, and they fenced 1-day paddocks. They have permanent 1-day paddocks on that ranch, and they go move cows every day on a 25,000 acre ranch. And we're not talking like a 2-acre paddock here. Like, I think we're talking like 10 and 20 acre paddocks that are permanently fenced with electric fence. And, hundreds or, up into thousands of head of cattle in one herd getting moved every day in permanent electric fence
rotational paddock. Grazing.
I mean, rotation implies that there's a system that, it's set. I think the term that Alejandro would use, or would like us to use, would be adaptive multi-paddock grazing, or holistic adaptive plan grazing. Like, there's too many damn terms around that nobody can agree on. Like, we don't have a common vocabulary and dictionary in regenerative agriculture and grazing, and it kind of pisses me off sometimes, but we'll get there eventually. But no, the difference is that he's found, it's very similar to what I've seen here, but he's getting results a lot faster on a bigger scale than I can afford to do here right now.
Yeah.
And, very similar. He's running double the cows or quadruple the cows that the neighbors are running, with 2 to 3 times the grass in a paddock that he moves out of than the neighbors have in their paddocks that their cows grazing in. Like, no kidding. Yeah. So
that's really interesting. I'm gonna look into that. Yeah.
Greening the desert. I will try to maybe I'll put something in the show notes for everybody, and I'll send you some messages later.
Cool.
This is a good time to do an ad read. So I'm gonna push the button and we'll be right back.
Perfect.
Introducing C90 Ocean Minerals. C90 offers complete nutrient support for today's farm and ranch. With over 90 minerals and trace elements in nature's perfect balance, C90 remineralizes soil, increases pasture quality, and elevates the wellness of your herd. Enjoy improved drought resistance, increased pasture protein and RFV values, and the elimination of pink eye and foot and hoof rot. Originally discovered by Dr. Maynard Murray, C90 is the only product that meets his standards for sea energy agriculture, including a living ocean source and elevated amounts of macro and trace elements. Freshly created in the Sea of Cortez and OMRI certified, C90 is free from pollutants and contaminants, including microplastics. Visit C90.com to learn more today. That's SEA-90.com. C90 is available through distributors across the U.S., including over 200 Tractor Supply locations. Click the link in the show notes to find the dealer nearest you. We're always looking to grow our network. Give us a call or email today, and be sure to mention that Ranching Reboot sent you. Please check the show notes for all the contact information. Now back to this week's episode.
And we're back. See, those ad reads aren't so bad. I do
That's
need
not
to
too bad.
I need to re-record that one.
That's not too bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So AI.
Mhm.
Educate me on AI. How would you explain AI in cows to a 5-year-old? Or to somebody, say, in Houston that works in an office that doesn't really see cows every day?
I think most people will know, even a little kid will know. The daddy cow and the mommy cow get together. Well, it's a way for the daddy cow, mommy cow to get together when daddy cow is $500,000 and halfway across the country. It's just a way to be able to better your genetics from bulls that you don't have access to, and be able to also shorten your calving interval to where you can have, you can do it with a bull too if you do it just right, but be able to have all your calves born on the same day, pretty much. It'll be a span of a week or two, but you can AI all your cows on one day. It would be the same if the bull went out there and bred all the cows on the same day. Also, it's not going to be every cow that's going to get pregnant, but
everything that's going to calve on that day, what is it, 268 days after service, or what is it, 252?
283.
283. So
280,
anything
yeah.
that calves, 282 to 284 after service, you can be really sure was out of your AI bull, and everything later is off your cleanup.
Yeah, and you'll put the cleanup bull in after, so that way you can, like right now, I've already finished all my AI calves being born, and the next go around is going to be all natural exposed, the ones that didn't take to AI.
Okay.
So that helps a lot, especially be able to animals that can take to AI every year. It shows that the animal's at least fertile enough that just one unit of semen, because when a bull breeds a cow, they can dump 200 to 400 units in a cow.
Okay.
And then when you go to AI, you're only using 1 unit. But the only difference is that the bull is depositing his semen before the cervix, and you're depositing that one straw on the other side of the cervix where the fertilization, everything will begin.
Where probably 90% of them would get passed anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Just giving
So
a little
that's
bit,
the biggest.
giving them a better chance.
Yep. And we try to. I've been AIing since I started, and it's really helped my herd.
Okay, so how many different ways? Let me back up. I know there's different ways to AI. Like, you can synchronize, you can flush. There's also like an option that uses less that you don't have to like flush them and synchronize them and use a bunch of hormones. Can you talk about those two different ways?
Are you talking about like IVF, in vitro fertilization? Because I think that's what you're talking about.
What I think I'm talking about is instead of bringing them in and putting the hormones in them to get them to sync up, to where you can come back in a certain time and hit them all with the straws.
Yeah.
Versus watching them and being like, she's ready, and then grabbing her and running her in.
Yeah. So like with the natural heat is what you're saying. Just let them come in a natural heat, and you take the signs off that. And let's say standing heat. For anyone who doesn't know, it's so if you have a cow that's showing signs of heat first thing in the morning, and another cow is riding her, and she's letting the cow ride her, the same as if it was a bull. If that was a bull jumping her and she's not running away, then she's ready to breed, right? So it would be the same, except the difference is whenever you see a cow in standing heat, you'll AI 12 hours later. So it's like the AM PM rule. If a cow is standing first thing in the morning, you'll AI in the afternoon, or vice versa. If she's standing in the evening, you breed first thing in the morning. And then we do it just because I mean, it costs maybe less than $2 per head, just because we don't have that many cattle. We'll give cisterellin whenever we AI.
What's that?
That is a GnRH. It's gonadotropin releasing hormone. It's one of the hormones that you'll give whenever it comes to AI and all that.
Okay, what is it in English?
Gonadotropin releasing hormone is what it's called.
Okay, so what does it do?
It
releases gonadin.
It releases gonadotropins. Gosh, I hope I'm not saying the wrong terms here.
What I'm asking is like, what biological function is it modifying?
It helps release the egg.
Okay.
Helps release the follicle. That's what it does. But the cow's already supposed to do that. If she's in a natural heat, she'll already do that. It's just kind of a assurance, just in case if you're not AIing at the right time. Because the reason you do that is because the egg will be released later on from their standing heat, and the semen, when you deposit it, also has to mature inside the cow as well. And I believe that takes about 5 hours for the sperm cells to mature in the cow as well.
Okay.
After it's been deposited. So it's just that little time frame that you have to go on. Now, I have AI'd on standing heat and given them cisterellin, and it's worked just fine. I was thinking about doing a little experiment, this fall, trying that a little bit and see if I can impregnate them on a standing heat, or if it works better 12 hours later. For me personally, heifers, and I've heard a lot of people agree with this, that heifers are easier to AI on a natural heat rather than putting them through protocol.
Okay.
Which the protocol we use, it's a 10-day fixed time protocol, where on day 0 we'll insert a cedar, which is a prostaglandin implant. It looks like a T.
CIDR, right?
Correct. It looks like a T. You'll insert it, and we'll leave it in there for a week.
And what's that do?
It releases prostaglandin,
which is
it's one of the hormones that the cow produces. It helps.
It's a female pregnancy fertility hormone.
It helps retain pregnancy also.
Okay.
But whenever you do that, you'll also give cisterellin, which is that hormone I was talking
to make it release the egg.
Yeah. But what that'll do also, it helps clear any if she's cystic. Also, if she has cysts on her ovaries, that'll help clear it as well. So on day 0, you'll insert the cedar and give the cisterellin. On day 7 at 5 p.m., we will take the cedar out and give them a shot of Lutalice, which is oh gosh, and the word just slipped my mind, but that is it's a hormone that helps them come into heat.
Okay. Regulates cycle.
I said prostaglandin, GnRH. I'll think of the name after.
I'm sure if you're wrong, I'm sure if you've said something wrong,
somebody will say,
I will get plenty of hate mail if you've said something wrong.
Probably. I'm embarrassed that because I say this verbatim all the time.
They'll email me, not you.
Right. Yeah. And then you'll do that. And so with that protocol, that's a fixed time. So 60 to 66 hours after you gave that shot.
The Lutalice?
Correct.
Okay.
After you give that shot, then you can AI in that span of time. However, if there are cows that show signs of standing heat, breed those cows based on that heat. So whatever cows don't come into heat, you'll AI in that span of time. And
so during that 7 days after you do the cedar and the cedar pull, you've got that 7 days, and then you do the Lutalice, and then it's 60 to 66 hours, you said?
Yes, that you'll fix time AI.
So you got like 12 days in there that you're watching for standing heats, or just okay.
Yeah. So 60, it's like 3 days. So after you give the Lutalize. So all non-responders, you'll AI in that little time frame, and you'll give them a shot of Cisterellin. And that's how you make up for the to make it a fixed time. So like their hormones are all set up. They may not have shown signs of standing heat, but then once you reach that 60 to 66 hours, you can go ahead and AI them and give them that shot, and it'll hopefully make them release the follicle, and you can AI then.
Okay.
And so then from that point, 10 days later, I'll put the bull in, and then whatever calves are born, whatever span of time after all those AI calves, then after that's just from natural.
Then
from the bull.
you know, yeah.
Yeah.
So on your cleanup bulls, because I'm sure somebody will ask, on your cleanup bulls, what's your bull to cow ratio?
Well, I have a small herd, so last and
So
also
a lot of power then.
So I had 3 bulls. Like I had one bull with the majority, and he had 25 cows with him. My other bull, who was he was 13 months, so I only put him with 5. He's my favorite bull, and I didn't want to overdo him or anything, being a 13-month-old bull, so I just put him with 5, maybe 6 cows. And
that
then
was just
another
the group
bull
that he fit with.
Yeah. And then another bull had, I believe, 10, but it was just more. Some of the cows can't breed those bulls because it's their sire or their maternal brothers, or
Right.
and
Well, isn't that
or
called
vice
line
versa.
breeding when it works?
It's line breeding when it works, and it's inbreeding when it doesn't. But I mean, we don't have any carriers that we know of in our herd for any defects, so it's nothing really that I'm too concerned about. I don't know if you ever heard of this, the old-fashioned way to find out if an animal's a carrier for a genetic defect.
Well, first tell me what like genetic defects we're talking about, and then tell me tell me how the old timers did it.
There's a few, and then some of them I don't even know if they should be considered defects in the way that they stamp them as a carrier for it. There's developmental duplication, which if you've seen before, it'd be like the calf with 2 legs sticking out of its head.
Yeah.
That kind of deal. That's developmental duplication. Those
don't sell very well at the barn at all.
No. It's been said that it's due to a twin. Maybe the calf was with a twin, but come to find out it's actually a recessive trait. It's a recessive genetic defect that the Angus carry. And then there's also there's curly calf syndrome. There's 9 total.
Okay.
That you'll test for. And well, the old-fashioned way that they did it, I don't remember exactly if it's 34 or 35, but you get 35 daughters out of a bull and have that bull breed all 35 of his daughters in one breeding season, in one go. He breeds all 35 of them, and if all the calves don't have defects, then he's defect free. Could be 36. And
I mean, the math works.
Yeah.
I mean, the statistics, the probability, I mean, the math works, but I don't know if that would really make sense a lot of times. But if that's the only tool you have, that's the tool you use.
Yeah. And there's Angus pedigrees. You can find bulls in there that go back 600 times.
Wow.
Yeah. 600, I've had animals that'll go back to a bull 100, 200 times sometimes.
Okay.
Great.
I feel like you've kind of explained AI, at least enough that either I understand it or my brain's so full I can't think of any more questions about AI right now. So I did have over the last couple weeks since we recorded the last one, and well, the last few days I've had a couple questions come in. I came up with a couple of my own. And I think we did kind of answer this in the last episode, but what are cattle worth in Brazil compared to here?
At the sale barn?
Yeah.
Same.
So roughly equivalent?
Yeah, if you do the conversion, because right now it's it's 19 US cents to 1 Brazilian real, which is like the dollar,
Right.
the Brazilian dollar. So you'll see the prices, like it might say $50 for a straw, but it's whatever the conversion is. So regardless, it'll be a lot cheaper, here in the US. But yeah, right now prices are the exact same pretty much. And they are more controlled by JBS than what we are, at least. I know
does JBS pretty much just tell everybody what they're gonna do in Brazil as far as
when you own the whole market, pretty much, you just say, hey, this is what we want. When you own the whole market, it's like, well, if we don't do it, then we're not, falling behind pretty much.
I mean, I don't want to get sued, but like, is there literally any other player in Brazil other than JBS?
That I don't know. I'm not too sure on that. When I went,
they're
when I
just so
went
big,
on
they're
that,
everywhere.
Yeah. Well, when I went on that trip just now, we passed 5 slaughter plants. We passed one that was for cattle, or maybe 4, but one for cattle, one for pork, one for poultry, and another one. I think it was another cattle one, actually.
Wow.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we really didn't cover last time was like the forage chain and feeding cycle. Not necessarily for cow-calf operations, but say for like a finishing type operation.
Okay.
So like what can you talk about, like the forage chain that they run their cows and calves on, the production herd versus what they run the finishing and production herds on, or the herd they're going to finish that they're going to the barn?
You mean like silage? That's primarily what they're going to feed is just silage.
Okay. Like as a finish ration?
Yeah, it's a finish ration pretty much.
So corn silage and grain, TMR, just pretty much like we do here.
Yep.
So
pretty much.
What about the cows? Like, how are the cows raised? And we can kind of preface it like, in this country, there's kind of 2 systems. There's what I do and guys north of me do that try to pasture all year and feed hay, feed protein into pasture. And there's guys that pasture the cows for about 6 months and then put them in a dry lot and feed them a ration the other 6.
The first.
Okay.
That's pretty well, because they don't have winter like we do up north, where it's they'll have green grass in the winter there, but they're not going to have however many feet of snow that they have to corral them. And because even in the winter there, they'll have green pastures, tall green pasture, and the cattle there are going to be framier. And the only reason for that is because of how tall their grass is. They need cattle that are a little bit taller. If you have those, like your cattle are just short farrow cattle, short, stocky cattle, you're going to start getting so many problems on their underbellies because their bellies are dragging the grass the entire time. And ticks are really bad too down there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the cattle, like, they're not going to, heck, they may weigh about the same, 1,000 to 1,200 pound cows, but their legs are,
they're a lot
like
farther off the
ground.
Yeah. That makes sense. And, it also makes sense why they like a lot of Indicus and the Lori blood down there is because of the pest resistance, the tick resistance.
Angus, there was a semen collection facility that we went to, and the Angus that were imported from the US to there, some of them just looked like crap because just in the little lots there, the ticks were so bad that they had to clean them off every single day. I worked at a ranch there once, and he would run Simmental bulls on his Nelore cows. He had an embryo transfer facility, so he would run Simmental bulls on the Nelore cows and use those recips, those daughters as the recips. The Simmental bulls would start getting ticks on their neck and on their butt, and then the flies would get in and start leaving their larvae in the neck, and they'd have this purple medicine that they would just go and spray on the neck, and just the smell of death and decay coming off, and just maggots would start pouring out of their necks because of the initial tick infection turned into a fly infection, then infested with maggots. And the Nelore would never get it, but only Simmental, Angus, any Bostars kinds of breeds wreak havoc on them.
Interesting. So, I mean, in addition to having, the Nelores, which are, a little more resistant to the ticks, what else do they do down there for tick control? Because here, what guys would do is, they'd go get the Saber or the Cydectin and, God forbid, ivermectin and drench their cows. And that would solve the problem here, with ticks and flies. How do they do it down there?
Same, pretty much. They might have some other ingredients or whatever that they use that they can use that we are not allowed to here. There's a lot of it seems like most other countries have a lot less restrictions when it comes to the hormones or whatever kind of pest control products that we can use on our cattle, on our pastures than we do here. But I think genetics plays the biggest, because the ticks are so bad. I think at the end of the day, it has to be genetics that saves them.
I think like everything. Well, I saw some of your videos. There's dip vats, and I would assume that they're going in those dip vats,
and they do have that as well. Yeah,
and that'd be for pest control.
Yeah,
and I guess I'm sitting here and I'm thinking of the story Alan Savory tells in, I think it's Holistic Management 3rd edition, about the tsetse fly areas in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
How that, they constructed these big, dip vats that they'd run all the cattle through. They tried quarantining these areas. They tried pulling the cows out. They tried burning it. They tried doing everything, and they couldn't control the tsetse flies. Like, the more things they tried, the worse they got.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what they ended up doing, but it's knowing Alan Savory is probably some holistic adaptive plan grazing, the way they started using those tsetse fly areas, and the problem got to be not as bad.
There you go.
So I think that I'm thinking about, okay, yeah, we have a problem with ticks in Brazil. Okay. The solution is not more and more chemicals, more and more toxic chemicals, because nature will find a way to evolve and do an end run around that toxicity. And I think, a lot of us can agree that, we sprayed so much toxic chemicals, so much that we don't know everything that we've killed. Like, we may have killed off 15 beneficial species with that chemical, trying to control the one that it barely affects.
Yeah.
And like, I had a conversation about fungicide lately. Like, have we sprayed so much fungicide in the world that we've eradicated the good fungus that's really susceptible to those kinds of chemicals, in order to kill the bad stuff that takes a high concentration of it? Have we eliminated so many of the good ones that's all that's left is the bad ones that are expressing themselves, and we have to continue to have increases exponentially in the order of toxicity in our antibiotics to fight these organisms?
At the end of the day, nature wins. Whatever you do to try and fight nature, it's going to come back in some form or fashion to hurt you another way. You may, you may get rid of a problem over here, but it's going to get filled up somewhere else. And it's like you said, well, we got to get rid of this weed over here. Well, in order to do that, you have to kill all these other beneficial plants. And then what's that going to do? Well, it's going to hurt your soil. It's going to do this and that. And so I think going forward, if not all producers at least started trying to implement more regenerative, or at least ways that working with nature on your operation rather than working against it. I mean, it'll probably, it could hurt your operation, not maybe profit per se, but it's going to end up helping the, the entire world.
Rising
I
tide
think.
lifts all boats.
Yeah. I got my words mixed up there, but
So since we last talked, you've obviously, it seems like you've done some thinking. What
Mhm.
are you going to be taking any steps towards a more regenerative ranch in the near future?
That's why I'm trying. My dad, I don't think this is true. He probably heard it from one of his friends, boomer face talk kind or Facebook kind of memes. It was something about California banned fertilizers or is going to ban fertilizers. I don't know if that's true or not. I tried Googling, I didn't find anything. But just him hearing that, he was like, yeah, we have to make sure that we can at least function and stuff, without fertilizers and stuff. Like, finally, thank you for listening. It took somebody else for you to catch on, but that's usually how it works. But
It only took the price doubling in 6 months and somebody else
yeah,
saying it for you to listen. Thanks,
yeah,
Dad.
because I want to keep doing this. I don't want to stop, but I think if I end up quitting the cattle, it's because I didn't manage everything correctly. And I don't want to have an operation where I'm so dependent on input. I'm going to have inputs. It's not, I'm not saying that I'm not going to have inputs, but the less inputs I have, being able to still produce the same kind of product, I mean that you can't argue that.
No.
Can't go against that. And I have grown up in a system where it's, oh, well, you have 100 acres to run the cows. Well, you have to run as many cows as you can, just give them feed, give them this, give them that. Well, then I have genetics that are surrounded around all this high input, and now I'm screwed. Now I have to get rid of cows. Well, I shouldn't have had to have done that in the beginning. If I'd have maintained this the entire time, I wouldn't have a problem. And so, at least on some of the pastures, I'm gonna try and recuperate them, plant more legumes in them, and try and help the soil more, so that way I don't have to feed as much hay. I'm I'm still going to be baling and making hay because in the winter, our small operation, I have cattle in every paddock. I have something in every pen. And so first off, I need to decrease the amount of cattle that I have because I have to keep some separate. I have to keep certain bulls away from,
Yeah, for sure.
from my small seed stock operation. So first off, I need to get rid of a few. So far, I've culled all the bad ones, and now all that I have left is ones that I don't need them, but they can go to someone and do a really good job for someone else. But for what I want, I can get rid of them. And it just so happens that all the ones that I'm wanting to get rid of all had heifers on their side.
Oh,
So
that
now I'm like,
sucks.
oh, well, now I got to keep you for a little longer. But at least now that I have daughters out of them, I'm comfortable getting rid of them.
Nothing
But
makes me happier than a heifer calf.
oh yeah,
I,
definitely.
New babies are always great, but it's always so much better when it's a heifer, not a
It
bull.
is. There's certain animals that I want a bull out of because I still have my dreams of raising an AI sire, raising a bull that everyone wants to use. So I'm still trying to tackle that. But there's certain animals that I'll want a female out of, other ones that, I want a bull. But I try to make every cross that I make with them with the idea of, well, if I get a female, I want the best female that I can. If I get a bull, it's going to be fine because I'm using the genetics of good bulls. However, I want to make the best female I can. And so if I get a bull out of that cross, to me it's, well, that'll be a bull that's maternally made. He'll at least have the genetics to produce good maternal quality. So far that's done pretty well for me. At least keeping that in mind.
That makes sense. And like the guys at Noble, they added the sixth principle of soil health: know your context. And know your context. What works for me won't necessarily work 100% for you.
Mm-hmm.
And the conversation we've been having about what is regenerative agriculture? Well, it's not a destination, it's a journey.
Yeah.
And we're all starting at a different place. And no matter where you are on your journey of regenerative agriculture and soil health, you're there. You've at least started asking questions. You listeners are, at least starting by listening to this podcast or whatever that's worth. And it kind of leads into a discussion that I want to have about, some of the dissension and division that we're experiencing in agriculture right now. And I don't like to put things in terms of winners and losers or contest, because we can all win.
Mm-hmm.
We can also all freaking lose big.
Yeah.
But we've got to work together. And, there's a lot of dissension. And I think the big difference I find between somebody that's stuck in a conventional mindset and stuck in that program versus somebody that's on a regenerative side is the guys that are on the regenerative side. What sets them apart is not where you are in the journey. It's the commitment to be a lifelong learner and the understanding that the things that we have learned and have the practices that we have been applying for the last, 60 plus years are quite possibly flawed, and we can do better.
That's the biggest point, is we can do better. There's a lot of people that get really upset. They're like, oh, those regen guys, and it'll never work and stuff. It's not that it won't work. It's that I think everybody should implement some type of regenerative practice, something that helps the soil without artificial, not by artificial means.
Right.
I think every operation at least has that duty to the land, to the earth, to do that. And I think ridicule of those kinds of practices, I think ridicule sometimes is the best means of being able to finally get it in people's mind of why the way you're doing something is kind of silly. There's always a better way. If it's not just a better way, it's also a more healthy way for your land, for your soil, for your animals. And being able to push the buttons on those kinds of people that are completely against it, I think over time is going to start opening some eyes some more. There's probably some means that maybe a little too harsh sometimes on on how some of them conduct themselves. Even me, I've caught myself doing it. And at the end of the day, I think what's the most important is the ag industry and trying to make sure that it is successful for everyone, and not just successful for everyone, but at least not an abusive means on the land and on the animals. Because to an extent, overgrazing the conventional way, it's abusive to the land. It's abusive also to the animals. The feedlots, I don't really like looking at feedlots. I don't like seeing the animals, cooped up like that, pinned together. Personally, I don't think that's how.
It's awful hard for me to drive down US 54 through the panhandles down into New Mexico, or even Highway 400 through western Kansas, out around Garden City, Dodge City. It's feedlot after feedlot after feedlot, then the Big Tyson plant, and then feedlot. You go down 54, and it's like they just might as well rename that the JBS Highway, because it's JBS and 5 rivers for like 200 miles down there.
Yeah, and I don't like looking at it. I think there needs to be a lot more, because it's not necessarily efficient for us. It's what's efficient for them.
Right.
And so,
well, we were talking about carcass size earlier.
Yeah.
Okay? Small cows make the cattleman money.
Yeah, that's efficient for us, but it's not efficient for them. That's not what makes them.
Well, big carcasses make them money.
Yeah.
But then you get them too big and you get discounted.
Yeah. It has to be just right. It has to be just right for our conveyor belts and everything. And
for our conveyors, the height the chain is off the ground, for the one cut we've trained all 3,000 guys to make, 6,000 times a day. Like, there's a point where efficiencies of scale loses sight and loses touch with the ecological and the human cost.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for as much crap as we can talk about feedlots, like yeah, they're bad, they're gross, they're ugly. Working conditions in a packing plant, living conditions.
Yeah.
Come on. Like, do you want to go live there? I wouldn't.
No.
Well, and that's why the people that are there because they will do that job and live there for that pay and that opportunity.
Yep. You know, in that there's just there's so much into it, and how do you get out of it as a system as a whole? You know, it's kind of, to me, it's not going anywhere. I don't think it's something that's just
No,
gonna
feedlots
go
aren't
anywhere.
closing tomorrow.
No.
Like they're, no matter how much Cory Booker and Elizabeth Warren wish they could, they are not going to ban feedlots. Feedlots are not going to empty out in the next 2 years by any sort of governmental pressure.
Yeah.
Could be completely wrong, but
I
I'm just
doubt it.
saying that
Yeah.
I'm just saying that the meat lobby is way too powerful to let that happen.
Yeah. And so at this point, it's those of us that would just want to take it back into our own hands, put it back into the people, into the producers, into what the way it's supposed to be, and not just a factory kind of product.
Yeah. And, I totally appreciate Mike Calicrate. I really enjoy that guy. I really enjoy talking to him, enjoy his mind. And I've talked to him enough.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to beat Tyson, Cargill, JBS, and Marfrig.
No.
We are not going to beat them. We can go to the Supreme Court with an airtight case, and we're not going to win.
Yeah.
Like, period. The only way that we're going to do anything different in our industry is to not play their game anymore.
Yep.
And that means inventing a different game. I mean, that means a lot of guys have to make a change. You know,
yeah.
Me, you, probably most of the people listening to this, we got to make some changes in our business to be more profitable. I mean, I don't know about you. I don't know what the Weather Service is saying for you for next year. Climate Prediction Center, they're saying La Nina is going to go 3. They're saying triple dip La Nina, which means more of the same weather pattern we've had for the last 2 years.
Because I mean, I've heard that it's supposed to lift by February. Well, that's what I heard, at least. So I don't know. I'm still trying to work towards hoping that it's gonna lift by February. That's just kind of how I'm pushing planting and stuff right now. So hopefully next year I'll be able to do this kind of crop. But man, if it's another year like that, though, it's gonna be ugly. It's not gonna be pretty.
Yeah, okay, that one TikTok you sent me the other day, I can't get that out of my head. I've been thinking about that like for the last 2 days.
Which one was it?
The one that's down in southern Oklahoma, southeast Oklahoma, that said that there were 150 bales short of hay. Now we could be talking about an 800-pound 4x4 or a 1,600-pound 5x5.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't think it's square bales.
No. So because a 1,600-pound round 5x5, that's what grucks in my brain, and I do that math real quick. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it works out to like that was 6,000 cow days worth of food that they're short.
Yeah.
6,000 cow, and you got to get to the 1st of May. Like, that's only like 50, 60 cows that they got to feed. Like, it wasn't that many that they're short. But it didn't seem like a large number to me of what they were going to be, of how many head that they needed to feed all winter. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's what, and I had asked, how many head are y'all running? Because 150 bales that's
not much.
That's
mean,
not much.
it's either all the hay in the world to a guy that has 5 in the backyard, or
Yeah.
it's nothing to a guy that's got 1,000 on pasture.
And how did they prepare for this point? Because there was a lot of hay for sale last year. There's been hay for sale everywhere. There was hay for sale in Oklahoma. I could have trucked down from like 2.5, 3 hours away, and it would have cost a pretty penny, but all the hay was there. So right now, if if we haven't prepared for the worst, or we have an operation set up for failure like this, it's just going to keep getting worse.
I there's almost nothing that I can say on that
Yeah.
other than you're overstocked. Take some fucking cows to town.
Yeah. And this particular one, it doesn't really seem like it's I think it's like a first generation operation. And they just want to have a ranch. They want to have cows, they want to have the chickens, and I want everyone to have that, but you have to realize that it's not just I want cows.
It's not
everything.
charity.
It's there's no reason for any kind of GoFundMe, I think, to be set up for anyone that hasn't prepared themselves.
And that's what I see people doing. That's what's really going to piss me off if I see this fall and winter is I see big operations, big cow calf operations start posting GoFundMes to get people to send them money so they can go buy overpriced hay because they failed to plan. What'll piss me off even more than that is if the government steps in and starts giving those people subsidies and handouts for their poor fucking planning and lack of preparation. And those will be the people that'll laugh at somebody like me that grazes year round and talk shit on my cattle. Like, go ahead, take that government handout to stay in business and then tell me how bad of an operator I am.
If I have to take cows to sell barns still because I wasn't prepared enough, I mean, that's on me, but I'm not gonna be like, hey, can y'all help me out, please? Can y'all, donate to my GoFundMe? I don't want to get rid of my cows.
Or dear government, help me, save my cows. Help me find some hay for my cows so they don't starve to death.
Leave the GoFundMes for, the kids that got sick all of a sudden, stuff like that you can't help. But the stuff that you can help, that you should have prepared for, and from that TikTok, you can see the pastures. I mean, it's a drought, and down here it's tough to really keep after your pastures, but it was dirt.
Exactly.
It was just dirt. And I mean, I'm super dry, but just halving off part of the pasture, letting that grow up, let the cows go hit that, have hay on the other side, and then when they're hit it enough, bring them back over, fence it back off, and just do something. At least just do one little thing like that. That's all, at least.
Yeah, just split it in half. Just split it in half and rest half of it.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to move them every damn day.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to move them every week.
Yep.
Just split it up and let part of it rest for a little bit.
And
you're right. Like, in the background, I only watched it like the whole way through one time.
Yeah, me too.
Because it's just hard to listen to. Like, if people knew where to look, if people actually would look, these drought indications have been there for 2 years.
Yeah, they were there.
I mean, 9 months ago in the spring, the Climate Prediction Center, the National Drought Mitigation Center, even National Weather Service, they're all saying it's probably going to be dry in the Great Plains this year.
Yeah. And go ahead.
And nobody listened.
Nope.
Everybody has faith. Oh, it'll rain. Oh, it'll rain. God will provide. No, that's not how it works here.
No, you don't. It's like, I know it's bad, but can you please? No, like, this is the way it was going to be to begin with. Everybody knew, been saying it. And I wish I had prepared a lot more than what I did. Still, I'm fine. But right now I'm just, I just need to prepare for each time that we do have rain, and at least just prepare for a year in advance. And I think that's a problem a lot of producers don't do, is look in advance of, well, if we're in a drought this part next year, I need to make sure I'm doing this right now to save me then. And that was something I didn't do before. I wish I had bought hay $70, $80 a bale when when it was available like that. I was like, nah, we'll be fine. No, and then when it got to 100, I was like, yeah, I need to do it now.
Maybe I should have bought that a couple weeks ago.
You know, because I mean, even our pastures, because our hay pastures, we have one. Well, we try to make horse quality hay for our horses.
Right.
For us, in the long run, we found it to be, I won't say cheaper, but it is more efficient for us to be able to bale all of our hay whenever we want instead of depending on someone else to do it, as well as instead of importing alfalfa.
Right.
Because we'll feed like 30
because your parents are still doing the reining horse thing.
Yeah.
So they probably want some really, really good feed.
Well, and what's good about the coastal that we bale, it's horse quality. We keep it up in the barn, and all we do instead of feeding alfalfa, we just take a bale down, open it up with the flat side on the ground, and just pull it off, put it on a little trailer, feed all the horses. And I've saved my mom so much money compared to paying for all the alfalfa that we would need to spend. And I have all perfectly good hay, and the horses look great on it. And so, and then from that, whatever else I have is for the cows. So that's the benefit on that. And at least, one thing I notice also is that people complain so much about the prices on hay. Oh, it's $120 a bale, $150 a bale. It's like, well, whenever cattle prices were good, people weren't complaining about how much a bull was and everything. Well, another thing that people, I think, forget to realize that if you have to feed hay, the better quality hay you have, the less you have to supplement. If you have $120 hay and it's really good quality hay, you don't have to have any supplement there. All that supplement's right there in the hay. It's in the grass that your cows are eating. So you're saving money. But then if you go cheaper, get $80 hay that they don't want to eat that much, well, then you have to supplement them with feed or cake or tubs, and then this more cost right there.
Speaking of tubs, I think I'm about ready to go get a couple pallets. I don't want to spend the money. Like, I don't even really want to spend the money buying alfalfa, but like, I think I'm going to be one truckload of alfalfa and probably 3, maybe 4 pallets of tubs should get me all winter. And that's feeding from probably November 15 to around April 15 on the alfalfa.
November to April, you said? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And well, I'm the low input weirdo in the area. So like,
yeah,
I'm not saying like my good manager neighbors are not hauling hay. Like their hay yards are like filling up.
Yeah.
But they are caking.
Gotcha.
The guys that aren't quite as good of managers, that have 1,800 pound cows.
Yeah.
They've been feeding for a while, and they're pushing 3-4 pounds a head a day of 30 to 40% cake.
Yeah.
Which I don't know how anybody can afford to feed more than 2 pounds a day of cake.
There's a gentleman near me just down the road, and he has what could be a perfect operation. He has all the implements he needs. He has 2 great big feed bins, and he feeds the grain to his cows. And his cows they're just all crossbred, and they're all skinny, and they still have to get fed grain. And I can't imagine where the profit is if they're just selling to the sale barn. And it's not just black calves, or calves that are colored all over them. They have all different kinds there's no consistency. So how much money are they spending right now on all this feed for the cow? Some of my cows I'm feeding right now just to give them the extra energy requirements they need to go on the corn stalks or something. But then once they have the good hay, they're not getting anything, because that hay is going to provide everything they need, or it's supposed to. And if they can't even handle themselves on good hay, they got to go.
They got to go find another job.
Yep. And right now, I think with everything that's going on, with the weather and inputs and everything, the kind of cattle that are really going to take a hit are going to be these EPD oriented Angus. At least they're really going to be taking a hit, because there's no way that all these producers,
the high input genetics.
Yeah.
I mean, whether we're talking about high inputs as far as, high inputs as feed, high inputs with, hormones, ionophores. Yeah.
A lot of times those kinds of people already have, they can pay for that feed and not hurt, so that's the problem when you get those kind of people that just have enough money to do whatever they want with it. Well, they're just going to continue a problem that is actually harmful in the long run, continuing these genetics that just aren't going to perform out in the pasture like they should. And I said this a while back, and some people had gotten mad at me. I didn't really think it was that big of a deal. But with the amount of cows that we've had go to the sale barn, to me, I called it kind of like a great culling. We had so many go. Well, the majority of those cows, what are they going to be? They're going to be probably the cows that are bad genetics. They're going to be all the cows that were infertile, bad calving intervals, couldn't keep up. They're the ones that got cleaned out. Those are the genetics that got cleaned out, and all the good genetics that were able to stay, that were fertile, and people didn't want to get rid of, they stayed. So, hopefully that's the silver lining I can see, at least in these kinds of situations, for the cattle market as a whole. If that makes sense.
I see it. We're talking about kind of a cow sell-off, which I think there is a cow sell-off kind of going on. So we've got our 8 and 10-year-old cows coming off the last good cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of those cows that people paid way too much money for in 2014 off the last high cycle are starting to come out of production.
Yeah.
That's the B herd and the C herds that are going to town that might already be in town.
Yeah.
And I'll just be blunt. In order to get through the next few years of agriculture, there's a lot of high input cows that are going to die.
Yeah.
Whether they die in a pasture because producer can't afford all the inputs, or they die at the barn, or they die at the plant. There's going to be a lot of high input, high energy needing cattle that aren't going to make it another 5 years.
And there's a gentleman down here in Texas. I think you kind of do. We've talked about it before, but they buy really cheap cows at the sale barn, try and feed them up, get them fat, and then resell them to other people. I don't know if you remember. And
I think I know who you're talking about. The guy that's really defending his antibiotic use.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that guy.
So to me, that how does that not cause a problem for customers? Because if you don't know why that cow is you'll buy open cows and get them pregnant and feed them.
They're all at the barn for a really good reason.
Exactly. And so now you want to continue those genetics. As I was sitting there thinking, well, I took some cows to the sale barn that needed to get slaughtered. What if a guy like this went and bought them, did the same thing that he was doing, feed them up and try and sell them, and now somebody's over there.
I get the business model. So you take one of your cows to the barn and they sell her for $100 to a guy like that. He thinks he got a great deal, not knowing why you took her to the barn. He's going to take her home right off the truck, put a needle of Draxxin or LA200 in her to make sure that, she stays healthy and doesn't get the rest of his cows sick that are standing in a dirt lot, getting fed hay and a ration. Okay. You can feed condition and fertility on anything.
Yeah, exactly.
And then he can turn around and feed those things for 30 days, make them look good. And as long as they've been standing in the pen with the bull, he can turn around and sell them as exposed and make a couple $100 a head on them, hold them for 30 days.
Yep.
Is that a viable business model? 100%. Is he doing anybody in the industry any favors? Fuck no.
No. And that's exactly it. He's just getting the rejects and sugar coating them with fat and
sell them to some other sucker.
Yep.
Exactly. I don't think guys like you and me are buying cows from that guy.
No, but somebody is. Somebody's like, well, I want to try and get into cows and stuff. It's like, oh, well, here's this guy. He seems like he knows a lot and stuff, and he's got these good cows. They're not quite as much as I was wanting to, thinking about spending. So perfect. That'll work for me. Well, then he's going to go and he's going to get my cow that had horrible feet, didn't get pregnant, couldn't keep weight, and then now the problem's just his. Well, No, we can't. I hate that business model.
But it's viable, and I don't know what we as fellow producers can do to discourage that practice, or if there's education that we can try to give people as to maybe why that's not so great.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, Kevin, there's 340 million people in this country. Something like 1.6% of us are engaged in agriculture. So what is that? 2 million.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the farmers, that's migrant laborers, that's landowners, that's tenant farmers, that's ranchers, that's custom grazers, that's feedlot operators, backgrounders. That's everybody.
Yeah.
So when you really drill down to it, how many people are in the cattle business? 1 million?
Even less than the
600,000?
1%.
Okay. So let's just say there's less than 1 million of us that own cattle.
Yeah.
Then we start getting down to like really breaking down how many guys are in seed stock, how many guys are in commercial cow calf. Like I don't even want to really count backgrounders and feedlots.
Yeah.
Because once that calf is a year old, if it goes to the commodity system, to me that's completely separate.
Like it's not at that point you're not a part of it anymore. It's
right. What once you take that animal out of the pasture and it gets confined for the rest of its life, like from my pasture, like for example, my pasture to the barn, to a backgrounder, to a feedlot, to the packing plant. Like when it sees its last day in pasture, that's when it's not even on my radar anymore.
Like we shouldn't consider them on the same rank as everybody else in the ag.
We shouldn't consider the guys that have a fucking feedlot a rancher.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Like you can ride that horse out there and check all those cows and feed them and keep doing that and farm the corn and everything, but you're not
that ain't ranching.
That ain't ranching. No.
Like if you're riding through dusty ass pens all day and you don't see a blade of grass, that ain't ranching.
Yeah.
To me anyway. Like write in if I'm wrong and explain to me how I'm wrong.
Exactly. It's I hate that we have such a system that's built like that, but at least that gives opportunity for the rest who don't want to live in that kind of system to at least grow and have their say more now that, because it's not just, I think the biggest problem is that people in the ag industry don't want to live by a notion the customer is always right. The customer isn't always right, but when a lot of the customers are telling you, hey, like we don't know exactly what y'all are putting in our food, we don't really like the way that you're handling the food,
and the American Meat Institute says, oh, that's fine, the science says it's safe, withdrawal periods.
It's like, hey, withdrawal periods, it's like, okay, that's a withdrawal to a certain level, and you don't know exactly what else, because I saw something yesterday about how, because I still don't know exactly how they test. I want to look into it more, but testing the carcasses for antibiotics, testing every single carcass, with as many thousands of carcasses that are being tested every single day, every single week.
It's like 650,000 a week.
Are you telling me every single 650, one of those 650,000 got tested? Every single one got inspected perfectly? Or even on top of that, whatever cattle that we're importing from other countries, guarantee it's worse.
Oh God, we haven't even talked about Brazilian imports yet.
Well, Brazilian, Mexican, Canadian, all of them.
So a couple years ago, I was at we were at executive link meeting for Ranching for Profit.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see, I got to leave out some names here so I don't get sued. There was a gentleman that was in his 60s that had been a feedlot vet for a long time for a major feedlot system. And when he sits in front of a room of 200 of us and says, yeah, pretty much everything is either classified as high risk or low risk. The high risk cattle get Draxon and the low risk cattle get LA 200 off the truck. So I raise my
when they go into
when they show up at the yard. High risk cattle get Draxon right off the truck, and low risk cattle got LA 200. So I held up my hand and I said, "Sir, are you saying every animal that gets off the truck pretty much gets antibiotic?" And he says, "No, I'm saying we classify things based on risk. Low risk animals get this, and high risk animals get that." And I said, "Is there such a thing as a no risk animal?" And he moved on to the next question.
Of course.
And that it's very, very similar from what we hear, on social media. Every once in a while, one of those guys that works at a feedlot or a big process or big feedlot or a big background will slip up and say, "Yeah, we do this with antibiotics, and this is why." Okay. So now you're trying to justify it.
So you do it. Or you're just trying to like keep it on the down low. Like, oh, look, it's not as bad as it sounds.
Well, they say like, "Oh, look, we don't just mass feed antibiotics indiscriminately." What do you call putting it in the feed? Like, what do you call an animal that walks off the truck and you have 10 seconds to look at it and you're sticking a needle in its neck?
Yeah.
Well, we have to do that because efficiency, because it's more profit. It's more efficient that way. You try riding through 25,000 head of cattle a day and spend 30 minutes a pen to pull calves. We don't have that kind of time. Well, that indicates that is a fundamental flaw in your production system.
Yeah, there's a problem there.
The fundamental flaw is we're putting cattle in an unnatural environment with a lot of an extremely pathogenic friendly environment. Like,
yeah,
we build these feedlots to be perfect environments for pathogens to live and breed.
Yeah. And then you have to give that's why you have to give antibiotics. You have to deworm them, have to do everything, vaccines, everything in order to just prevent the like you said, the environment that they created.
Like lung cysts and lung problems in feedlot cattle. Like, hey, if they weren't standing in the middle of 75,000 other cattle in 15 acres in a dusty lot for 3 months, their lungs probably wouldn't be fucked up.
Yeah. And or having 3,000-4,000 head just dropping dead in a couple days because how fat they are, how because they don't have shade. They don't even have a way to escape the heat.
I almost forgot about that.
Yeah.
I kind of had forgotten about that. And
I think, everybody.
At the time when that happened, I really tried to stay quiet because whatever the number is, whether it was 1,000 or 10,000, it's horrible. It's horrible that those animals had to go through that. And what makes it even worse is people put them there. People put them in that condition. People put them in that unhealthy condition and that unhealthy situation where a little bit of heat overnight was too much for them. Now, I'll also say this. I've heard that maybe one of those places that had a bunch of cattle perish had some water issues for a few hours.
Yeah.
And I can buy, when cattle don't have enough water when it's that hot, like they almost go into a scarcity mindset and almost panic. Yeah. Like, and when water does come back, instead of drinking the 20 gallons they normally would, they're going to drink 30. Yeah. Because they're worried that it might not be there again when they come back. I get it. It makes sense. Whether there was or wasn't a water problem, like, people still put them in that situation. Go ahead.
Sorry. And before I defended it, saying like, look, that's a normal, that's a thing with weather. It happens. And what are you going to expect whenever you have super fat cattle and you have weather changes like that and they're overfed, there's no shade kind of deal. And I was talking to another guy and he was saying, there's also possibilities somebody screwed up in their rations. Could have messed up in their food and done something like that.
That's entirely possible that there could have been a truck that got mixed with too hot of a ration for the temperature and they mistakenly fed it to a couple pins. That could have happened. Good luck at getting anybody to ever admit that.
And it also reminded me of back during COVID when we were having so many issues with like pork and poultry. I don't know if you remember, there was I'm pretty sure it was pork. There was a plant, I think up in Iowa, that they did
they had
what's
to
it called?
euthanize several entire barns of hogs up in
And they
Iowa.
did it through like asphyxiation through heat, through the humidity, if I remember right.
I thought
And
they pumped in like CO2 into the barn. Like
it was something like that, to where they pretty much suffocated.
not a great way to go.
And but to think like, man, I don't like that. I'm in the ag industry. I'm a part of this, and how can anybody sit there and just sweep that under the rug? Like that's bad. And
Yeah.
there's no reason we should be having some kind of system that allows. I I don't blame people for becoming vegan, for going and seeing something like that, because that's poor
I-
production. That's awful.
Our friend Chip McGregor hit the nail 100% on the head when he said that feedlots, chicken barns, and hog houses are why the vegans are going to win.
Yeah, it's because of that, and that puts all their focus on those things, and they think, well, because this is what we see, that must mean it's everything. And well,
Yep.
it's not.
Yeah, and they lump guys like us in with that.
Like, help us try to get away from that. You can be on our side. You don't have to eat meat. You don't have to use animal products, but at least support the ones that are trying to do a good job taking care of their animals, taking care of the land, and trying to ensure that when we do slaughter them and utilize them, that it's done humanely, it's done efficiently, and it's done but they don't.
I mean,
a lot of time.
No matter where you are in agriculture with livestock, and I think we would all agree on a couple things. Okay, we need to support other people in our industry.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. I can't support somebody that's using indefensible practices. Like if you can't defend your practices against public scrutiny, I'm not going to help defend you.
Yeah.
And COVID shined a light in a lot of dark corners. Social media. When smartphones came out and there was a camera and they put the first camera on a phone and it could do video. Like almost immediately I had the thought like, holy shit, there's going to be so much awesome stuff on YouTube now. Like there's going to be plane crashes. There's going to be car wrecks. There's going to be all this stuff because everybody's got a camera with them all the time. And it didn't happen. And it didn't happen. And it didn't happen. And then like now here we are 15, 20 years later. Now that's the reality.
Yeah.
That, there is a lot more transparency, that there is a lot more flow of information, and colleges, universities are no longer the universal seats of learning that they once were. I mean, we have these supercomputers we carry around in our pocket. You're probably listening to this podcast on one of them right now. It is literally a supercomputer that's more powerful than every computer on Earth 40 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Like it's so wild to me that we get to watch the collapse of civilization on a worldwide scale
in 4K.
in 4K streaming. And I can watch that in the bathtub. I can watch it when I'm out in the cow pasture. I don't have to sit on the couch in front of a TV. The interconnectivity that social media and smartphones and the internet has brought us, it's brought so many of us closer together. It's created so many different new communities, but at the same time, it's also allowing us to shine a light in those dark corners of our industries that we don't want anybody to see.
Yeah.
Or not that we don't want anybody to see, but the people that made those dark corners don't want you to see. And
force the uncomfortable conversations a lot. I think that's a really important part of it too. The the ag industry is going to have to, I think it's going to be making a lot of big changes, especially in the next 10 years. I think it's either going to look really ugly for a lot, or, really good for some. It's tough to even say, really.
Well,
It's not going to be like the last 20, 30 years.
it's going to be different. It's definitely going to be different. And my crystal ball got really cloudy about mid-March of 2020, and it hasn't really cleared up.
Yeah. Once that happened, I mean, I got really lucky right when it hit in April. I had a meet and greet, open house bull sale. I had all my bulls there available to sell, and I was like, man, I'm not going to be able to sell any of these bulls. And luckily, I sold all but 2 that day. That was perfect. I had enough people come in. I was like, if that didn't happen, I'd be screwed for the rest of the year. And hopefully, ever since then, it's gotten better. But the thing I keep thinking is, the price of diesel, feed, fertilizer, pesticides, all that stuff is not going to just become cheap again. And it's not just going to have okay, you can use whatever you want. It's where we really got to start hunkering down on how to take care of ourselves without everyone else, at least, inputs, and see how far we make it, pretty much.
And I hope we can make it to the end, or at least some of us, enough of us that we can, keep some people fed.
Yeah, exactly. That's the goal. Hopefully if I don't last in the cattle business with my cattle, I'll at least be able to do something in it. I'll be able to continue something going forward. So.
Okay. I know we've been at it for just a little over 2 hours. You good? You need a break? You want to keep going?
I'm fine. Whatever.
Okay. So this morning, Lincoln was texting me. I think he just listened to our last episode together. He was asking about SAV genetics or SAV bloodlines.
Yeah.
If you had any plans to add in any, where'd it go? I see Kevin likes those SAV bulls, and I've had a hard time with SAV. Having bulls with 1,000-pound, 205-day weights is not real world sustainable.
That is, I mean, I understand that. The thing is, though, is that when I use those genetics in my herd, I get the heavier weaning weights. I get the better maternal quality. And that's just me. I don't care if anybody else doesn't use them. That's just what I use. That's how my mentors in Brazil and here, that's the kind of cattle they use. It's the kind of cattle I like. And I'm just trying to make my own herd utilizing some of those genetics. It's not all of them, but I don't even pay attention to those weaning weights and stuff. If you have the money to be able to feed them out that heavy, do what you want. But luckily, the genetics that I've used, they benefit me. So I don't get 1,000-pound weaning weights. I'm probably never going to, but they always end up being the heaviest weaned of the group compared to other bulls that are like, well, look at my top 1% EPD for weaning weight. Well, usually I don't get that actual performance out of that animal compared to the other ones.
Okay.
Because even then, here's another thing though. When you look at those 1,000-pound weaning weights, another thing to remember is how they ratio in their contemporary groups. So if you have a contemporary group of, let's say, 50 bulls, because they're all born in the same time span, and all 50 of those bulls were in the same program and they were fed the exact same, and you take the average weaning weight of all 50 of those bulls, and let's say it's 900 pounds. Well, you'll set that 900 pounds to 100 as the median, as the average. We'll just say 100. So any animal that weans heavier than 900 is going to end up having a ratio number higher than 100, and anything less than 900 pounds would be less than 100. Okay. So let's say I have a bull that weaned 1,000 pounds in that contemporary group. Well, he's going to ratio over 100. He might ratio 120. Let's say the association will say he ratioed 120 in that contemporary group. Well, that's telling me that bull performed better in the same group than another bull, even though it was a 900-pound weaning weight. 900-pound weaning weight anywhere else would be like, that's amazing. But in that program, it didn't perform quite as well as the other bulls.
900-pound
makes
weaning weight would kill my cows.
Exactly. But, you know, if you took that same contemporary group, let's say those same 50 bulls, and put them in your program, well, that bull that weaned 1,000 pounds and he had that high ratio in your program, he might also have that high ratio, but
Right,
comparable to the kinds of weaning weights you would take out.
Like, so down the road on a Gardner cow, he would wean, you know, a 900-pound calf, but you bring that bull and you put him on my little cows and he's going to wean something like a 650, 700, where, you know,
Yeah.
another bull would be weaning like a 5 to
Yeah.
650.
And, you know, there's so many genetics out there that can produce just as heavy a weaning weights and stuff. Is at the end of the day, for the last 30 years, weaning weights, they say weaning weights have increased, which I mean they have, but at the same time, if you look at the bulls from back then compared to now, they're all still in the 600 to 700 pound range. Nothing's really changed in the grand scheme of it all. I think they've been able to reach that quicker, but at the same time, the weaning age is still the same. It's not like that's changed.
Right.
Still going to be, you know, 205-day weight or however they want it. And so that doesn't really bother me too much. I'm not really trying to worry about the weaning weights too much, because for me and my operators, that means I'm pushing too hard if I get way too big a weaning weights. There's some animals that just excel beyond the others, and they're going to be way heavier than some of the rest. And those are the ones I'm going to try and utilize the genetics on, as long as I didn't have to feed them so hard to get to that. I creep feed a little bit, you know, I'll give them maybe half a bucket or so, depending on how many are in the pen, but I just give them enough that they can go in there, eat several bites, just to also help out the cow with my small operation. That's what we've been doing, but we'll see how that goes.
Okay. Kind of last question, then I'll let you go and get on with the rest of your day.
No problem.
And it's not really a question, it's kind of a statement. So Lincoln also was talking about going back to some of the old Angus bloodlines and seeing good results with them as far as grass efficiency. Bloodlines like Emulation, Rito, Nutrend, and Traveler, which, I mean, those all could have been Greek and I wouldn't know anything. Does any of those names mean anything to you?
Yeah. So, well, the Rito genetics, that when I use the Schaff genetics, I really like Resource and Renown, who are full brothers, and they're out of a bull called Rito 3407 7075 of
I think I've heard you talk about Resource before.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah. And so that's those genetics.
Okay.
And combined with Traveler genetics on the bottom. So for me, those genetics do really good. I love those.
Traveler genetics on the bottom, you mean on the maternal side?
Yeah. So like the maternal grandsire, which would be the dad of the mom, he's an SAV bull, but he's Traveler lineage.
Okay.
So like you'll have I'm really bad on the Angus genetics compared to the Brahmas, but you have one bull Traveler. Well, then he has a son that's like Traveler the second, and then Traveler. It's a lineage of bulls that are named Traveler. And same way with the cows, it's a lineage of cows with the same name as a family.
Yeah, coming up with names for my cows is always a challenge.
I think he's right though. The EXT and all those bloodlines, you can't really go wrong back in the time when that's where they were focused, was, you know, maternal quality and maternal production, especially.
I don't think I've asked you about Federal Cattle Company. What do you think of their bulls?
I've looked at some of the catalogs and I don't need this, but I've heard he's a master marketer. I've heard there's people that have done really good with their cattle. I don't know anything about it, but it's not what I use. But
I'll just say the same thing I always say when somebody asks me about Kit Pharaoh. I believe he could sell freezers in Fairbanks, Alaska in February. Okay. And ice makers in Fairbanks in February. Okay. I also think that he's got some bulls that live up to what he says they'll do.
Really? Because I don't see them much. I don't see much advertising, that kind of stuff. So that's why I always kind of stays under the radar for me.
Okay.
But
well, I think that's about all I got today, buddy.
Appreciate it.
Been long enough.
It's
I'm
been
really,
good. Really
yeah.
enjoyed it. Both episodes. This is, love doing this. So
Okay. So lightning round, not lightning round. Maybe literally the last question. Where'd it go?
okay.
I didn't have you scheduled for back to back.
Okay.
I had you scheduled for 2 weeks from now. But I don't know if I want to sit on this one for 2 weeks. I think I want to release Kevin Deleu part 2 as episode 85 next week. How do you
Cool.
feel about that?
That's fine. It's
All
good
right.
with me.
All right. Them other guys, they're going to get bumped. They can deal with it. They probably don't even know who they are or that I'm bumping them. So that's fine.
Right. No, thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, that's it. Gang, go have a great week. Get out there and make it happen.
You too. Take it easy.